Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of me drawing stuff, and with stuff I mean Goldship, the character Goldship from this anime called Uma Musume. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I pronounce that correctly. And yeah, first step is just figuring out the pose, thumbnail sketching, and I was initially going for a cross-legged pose, as you see here. Then looked for some references on Pinterest, and decided to go for a different pose because this reference looked kinda cool, dynamic with a more wide angle look. I guess it has like more Guna characteristics to it because the legs are not crossed but open like that. But yeah, what I found very important for the pose is that it made sense in the sense that there should be a reason why the character is positioned that way, and that the character is actually doing anything. You see in a lot of amateur art, but I would also consider myself an amateur still. You see characters posing, or like even in like sensual, suggestive art, and the pose just doesn't make sense. Like there's no reason for the character to be in this position. So this was very important for me, and I wanted her to look at her boot where like a small pebble is falling out. And yeah, after the thumbnail sketch, I already went into the more detailed sketch, but it's still like a rough sketch. But I already noticed that the torso doesn't look right, like the shoulders, the arms, how it's positioned. And as you will see shortly, drew a little question mark there. I noticed that her left arm needs to be behind her body a little bit. So yeah, re-tilting the torso, kind of, corrected the pose. And it's important to do these corrections early in the drawing process and not go into more and more details, and then after putting down line art even realize, oh, maybe I should have fixed that beforehand. This is what happened. As a little foreshadowing in this drawing with the right foot, maybe you see it, like the right leg, maybe you see it already that it doesn't really look correct. For some reason I drew in the toes already, but she's wearing clothes, so this was kind of irrelevant, but they just consider it training, I guess. For the fingers I used my own hand as a reference, so they make sense. Hands are just something I still struggle with. I guess every artist kind of struggles with these. Yeah. Why did I draw this character? Why did I decide to draw Goldship? I wanted to draw some more popular character, someone who's more relevant. Maybe the algorithm likes that, or maybe you, fellow viewer, were more interested to click on that if the character is actually kind of trending right now. So I looked up most trending or most currently popular anime characters. I'm scrolling down the list, and it's all male characters, but no male characters allowed on my canvas. So I was scrolling, and I don't even know if I found a single female character on this list. But then I was like, oh, this anime is kind of not even huge, but like in the kind of meme culture right now with the anime girls, or like horses reimagined as anime girls. And I was like, oh, why not? It was a nice challenge for me because I never had the experience of drawing this kind of complex clothing. Maybe it's not even that complex, but for me it was. And yeah, here I drew the boot she's holding in her hand, which turned out pretty well. Like, obviously it's just a rough sketch, but the detailing was pretty easy after that. Putting down the eyebrows and eyes is, I don't know, makes the most fun, I think, but I kind of saved that for when the entire pose is already kind of put down. And yeah, obviously I used references for the character design. I had one for the pose, but in this reference, the character, or like the woman, was wearing very like loose, big clothes, so I couldn't use it for the intricate details. And yeah, the rough sketch phase was pretty much over. As a little foreshadowing, which I already said, the right foot needed some touch up, which I got in way too late and wasted like 1 hour of work, I guess. But yeah, this part of the drawing is kind of to determine where the final line art should go. I guess if you're more experienced and more advanced in drawing in general, you don't need this step. You can just look in the final line art and make it up as you are drawing. But I found it helpful to add yet another, I guess you can call it sketching layer, to determine where the final line art is actually supposed to go. Now here I drew over the bow tie with another color, because it's easier to use another color and not get confused with all the other lines for the bow tie. Because I don't remember drawing a bow tie anytime in my life. So this was also a first for me. And the shoe was also very difficult. Maybe you can say difficult. It's just like very detailed boot, and all this work right here is redundant on this foot because I'm going to change it later on. Maybe you see it right away, but I didn't realize it up until flipping the canvas way too late, that this entire right foot, right leg is in a weird orientation. Like it comes out the knee in a weird way, and it kind of looks like as if I'm drawing the left foot. You know, the shoe doesn't really look like the right foot. But anyways, yeah, I'm already using the pencil, which I'm going to use for the final line art, but without any smoothing. And it's from the Mark Brunet. I think it's 10 free brushes from Mark Brunet. Very, very talented artist and teacher as well. Big difference in being good at something and being good at teaching it. And yeah, this pen worked really well for me. For the sketches, you should use a more what's it called? More rough brush, and I used kind of a cube shaped brush. Yeah, and for the line art, a finer one. And here I wanted to have this overlapping thingy on the boot to actually hang over. Is that how you say it in English? I have no idea. But yeah, I wanted to make the physics show a little bit more. And so I did like 2 rough sketches on the left of the canvas, and then looked in on, and then like how do you say it? Yeah, then added it to my actual drawing, I guess. Yeah, here looking in the shape of the boot, the length, making it kind of match the one in the front, and drawing all the belts and the belt buckles. And the buckles were also very, not tedious, but obviously it takes more time to draw the buckle instead of leaving it out. Another small problem I faced, or like difficulty, was that I used several character designs of her as a reference, and some were fan arts that were like simplified, and I think some were even AI. So I made sure to actually use the correct character to reference, but it's still some artistic rendition. Like the clothing doesn't actually go between her crotch and come up the other way, but I saw that in one fan art rendition and thought, oh, that looks kind of cool. So I adapted it. So I used it for myself. How do you say it? The glove and the fingers. Yeah, for the fingers I used my own hand. This is currently my kind of life hack for drawing fingers, taking a photo of my own hand and then referencing it. But I kind of rushed it, so the fingers don't really look natural. Some are too long, and as you see, I use a different color to draw over the line art. But even this blue one will be touched up later on again. You should spend a good amount of time on hands and feet if you draw them, because if you don't get them correct, obviously you'll be angry, disappointed later on if they don't look right. And here the head, same procedure, different color, getting in the details, I guess. And another bow tie. And then whenever I'm happy with them, I tend to erase the line art behind it, or like use a mask for that, and use the black color. And realized all these other accessories that this character has, like these stripes on her gloves and boots, as well as a belt on the leg. And yeah, here I said, okay, the rough line art, well no, the determined line art is now set in stone, so let's go for the final line art layer, finally. And with the eyes, this is kind of the point where I can really see, okay, this is not really actually the final line art, because I really need to know how to put the lines in the eyes, because the eyes draw the most attention by far. If the line is not 100% correct on the outline of the legs, you can get away with it. You can get away with it pretty easily. But yeah, the eyes can never really be too detailed. You can get away with a drawing that is like lacks some details, but still has very detailed eyes. Because I don't know, it draws the most attention, and it's like the face is always kind of filled with intricate details, and the hair strands and stuff like that. So yeah, you can get away with over detailed eyes, I think, but not under detailed eyes. What else can I talk about while I'm doing the line art? This doesn't really need much explanation, I think, so I can ramble about other stuff. What is interesting though is for this final line art, I'm using a smoothing option in the pen, like 20% smoothing. And for some bigger outlines, like I used for the hair, I used an option in Photoshop. What's it called? Kind of lets you draw a line, and after that the line is generated. Like you make a motion with the pencil, and the line only appears after you're done. Kind of, it's like you're pulling, like almost like pulling a line and not really drawing a line. Yeah. And by the way, this entire drawing is sped up by 2000%, which is 20x the speed, and it took me 13 hours to draw entirely, like with the rendering and all that stuff. Oh yeah, funny detail here, you see that the torso is kind of more bluish than the rest. It has like a frame, and this is because when I was drawing, my PC crashed and some progress was lost, but I still had the screen recording, so I took a screenshot of the screen recording of the already sketched torso and just used that as an overlay, so I didn't have to do the rough sketch again. Drawing the breasts within clothing is much easier than drawing them naked, because the clothing kind of keeps everything in place. Yeah, funny little detail there. I was also surprised when I was looking at the stages. Like I kind of grouped them into thumbnailing and rough sketch and final line art and rendering. That the final line art took by far the longest, I think. Or like it took a similar amount to the shading and the rough sketch, or like getting the line art in place, but the thumbnail sketch was so quickly done, even though this is like the base, most important stuff. It's kind of this rule, like you get 20%, 80% of the outcome in 20% of the time. Because right now you already know what this drawing is gonna look like even after the thumbnail sketch. But this is actually what takes more time. It's the same when you talk about like a business idea. Oh, I have this business idea, let's do this and that. But the idea is not the crucial part. The crucial part is actually putting the work in. It's like when they said robots and AI is going to overtake the construction and craftsman jobs. But now we see like art, music, drawing and videos getting taken over. Because the AI is just digitally like translating an idea into a concept, that you can't just create a building out of create a building out of an idea. You have to put the work in. And here for the belt, I used it's very clever. Used this mirroring option, so I had to draw half of it, and the other one, yeah, was basically like just copied to the other side, which is also quite interesting for line art, because it tends to, I think it's not a problem, and it tends to look like more like painterly, or like not that perfect. But for some shapes, like these circles which you can see in the torso, which are not lined out already, and like what I want to get at is like symmetrical shapes that you can find in clothing. They could look perfect, like you could, like here I could use perfect spheres, but I thought like they might stand out from the rest because I'm not using perfect shapes for everything else. So I would have used perfect shapes just for like the buckles and the like these circle thingies, whatever they're called in the torso. Same with the iris. Like when you draw eyes, you could use a perfect sphere for the iris, or draw them yourself and get some imperfections. It's up to you, I guess. Is it weird when I do like talking breaks, like breaks from talking, because I'm yapping the entire time, and I feel like when I stop talking for like 20 seconds, you as the viewer might think, oh, maybe the audio is disconnected. It's not. So if I'm quiet, I'm just quiet like that. Yeah, for these bow ties, another bow tie. I wasn't completely sure of this one because the way I drew it here, it looks like it's kind of blowing in the wind. But I could have used just a very static look. I think would have worked just as well, I guess. And yeah, all this line art you would see me do here for this right boot is pretty obsolete because I only got the idea to actually flip the canvas when I was done with the final line art. And then I realized, oh, looks weird, do over, and yeah, lose 1 hour of work. This is also something I dislike about line art, when you want to get like the perfect line and you draw it again and again, which you saw on the belt thingy on her leg. I drew the same line like 15 times. So I might want to try some more painterly style in the future, where you just get the very rough shapes and sketches and go more and more detailed. But I think there's also some like give and take to every technique of drawing. Like line art also has its benefits for sure. Now for the hair you can go very detailed, but this worked surprisingly well. Like it's almost like just a flat shape, and where the hair ends, like the ends of the hair, I'll just put in some cracks. What are they called? Like what I want to get is like you can see so many different ways of drawing the hair in line art. You just have to figure out what you want to use, like which strategy. And this was very easy to draw, the way I drew the hair here, but I think it worked out pretty fine. But you can draw way more individual strands, of course. And this bow tie here in this area, does it make sense? I guess kind of, but it's also interesting because when you draw very like parts where a lot of stuff is going on, like very complex areas, it doesn't need to be like 100% realistically correct, because nobody can really imagine what it actually looks like. Obviously, when you have a reference or the know-how, just go for the most realistic look. I guess the bow tie on the shoe she's holding could look better, but I think it works, and you're not really paying attention that much to it. But the eyes need get a lot of attention, so you will see me later on as putting in some more work for the pupil and iris, because I think like in this sketch right here, she kind of looks weird the way she's her eyes are looking. Maybe she's like not really looking in the same direction. here I'm doing a outline. I wanted to do an outline for the entire drawing, but then scrapped the idea because I thought it doesn't really look that nice. And in general, I used a 5 pixel. Yeah, the pixels used a brush size of 5 pixels for almost the entire line art, except for the legs where I used 11 because it's just more in front of the frame, so it made sense that these lines that are more in front of the camera are bigger. And here, this is also a very nice advantage of line art. I basically copied the entire line art on the single layer and then filled in all the empty space with the the base color. And here you see me doing some adjustments and then the canvas flip, and then I realized, oh no, the right leg it looks crazy goofy, and I was like, oh, maybe I can fix it with some orientation, but then figured out no, needs complete do-over. Yeah, even though so this is like the main mistake of this drawing, which I then had to fix. And yeah, for filling in the base color, I can tell you, I don't really like to put the entire line art on one layer too early, which was an advantage because now I could use several layers and delete some of them or adjust some of them, which you see me do here later on in its lag. Because obviously when you connect the entire line art, you only have this one layer to work with and can't really make adjustments that easily. And so I copied the entire group of all the final line art, put it in one, then selected the empty areas and increased the area size by 2 pixels, and then filled in the color. Because in Photoshop, if you use the bucket tool and you don't extend the selection, you get these weird rims where the line art is, but by extending it, you kind of increase the area size, so the color actually goes under the line art. And here I managed to, I got like a pretty rough sketch down, as you see in this blue coloration. But then, because I already knew how the boot should look like, I got right into the final line art. So this black coloration here is already the final line art. I didn't have to do like another layer for determining where the line art should go. And this worked surprisingly well. And yeah, because this line is not as prevalent as the others, because it's not really an outline, just like a line in the fabric, I actually used the 5 pixel width again for that. And you got to be somewhat creative for line art, because you have to kind of translate reality into lines, because the saying lines don't exist. Lines are basically just like where two contours meet, I guess. So you have to get like a bit creative, like some creases or wrinkles you can do with line art, or just leave them and like paint them in later in the shading, which I also did for the boot. So you have to find the fine line or the balance between where do I line art and what do I put in lines and what am I going to indicate with shading. Like especially if you were to draw like a muscular body and have draw like the stomach or the six-pack. Obviously you're not going to draw every single like muscle fiber with lines. This would be like the most extreme. But like where do you draw the line? Or like when you draw the hips, if do you want to indicate them with lines or just with shading? And yeah, you just gotta find the balance, I guess. Here I'm doing the base colors of all the things. Like the pants had one color, the gloves had a similar color, but I actually used a different layer, I guess, for the gloves. The main clothing on her torso in red, and all these little details, these metal golden details. And what tends to work pretty well for me is determine what layer is at the very bottom. This would be like the pants, and you can overdraw over all the other layers because they will be drawn on top. Like you don't have to limit yourself to the contours with the first layer you put in, because you're gonna draw over them. For example, as you see when I zoom out, the red main, sorry, I have no idea what the clothing part is called, but on her torso, that red thingy, I could have drawn over the belts, because they will be filled in later on the separate layer in brown. But again, I used the advantage of the line art, so I just had to select the areas and drew them in red. But if I didn't have the luxury of this line art being so, yeah, like perfect, and what I mean with like perfect line art is that there are no gaps between the lines, so you can actually select the empty area. Yeah. And what's pretty neat is when you go into this detail. Here I wasted some time because I drew in separately, and then I realized, oh, I can just select the area and paint the entire stuff. I could have done the same here with the bow tie, but then it was pretty fast anyways. But what I mean with the head, like I painted it in brown, would have been smarter if I either drew the entire area in brown and then put the golden details on later, or just, as I did later on, then was select the empty area and filled it in with brown. Mildly interesting facts here. And here you saw a little shift in the colors. And here I forgot to record the rendering of the torso. My bad. I used this cube-shaped brush for the shading, and I actually used the color reference. You see here on the left of the drawing, like left to her right knee, 2 color palettes already, one in red tones and one in these white-blue tones. Or if you have seen the dress, maybe it's like gold for you, gold and white, or black and blue. What colors are these? And I used the color reference and selected like the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows, and filled it in. Also using a reference, but also partially from, I guess you say, common knowledge, or like thinking, okay, this is where the shadow should be, and this is where the highlights should be in general. The neat part about this kind of rendering style is, because it's kind of painterly, I used a very rough brush in the beginning. And what I mean with rough brush is I used this cube-shaped brush in the size of 100 pixel. Put down shadows, put down highlights, and then I could make another layer on top of that, and you only use size 50, and then paint over it. So with painting you can always fix it. You go very rough. Essentially, it's kind of the same as doing the line art part, where you do a thumbnail sketch, then a rough sketch, and then the final line art. And with painting, you can do like very rough shadows, very rough highlights. You still see it here on the breasts, on the torso, that the shading is pretty rough. And I'm going into it later on to make it more fine and detailed. And when you look from afar, you don't really see the details even. Like, you can decide how detailed you want to make the shading, I guess. All these metal parts were way more complex to draw because they reflect so much sunlight, or like light in general. If something was like Vanta black or like very dark and it barely reflects any light, there's no big difference between the highlights and the shadows. But on like highly reflective materials like these metal parts, the difference between the highlights and shadows, like based on like hue, saturation, and brightness, are very big. This right here looks okay, I guess. All these like little imperfections, I don't think there's anyone unless you specifically ask for it, who looks at every little detail of your drawing and sees, oh, this doesn't look correct, now the entire drawing falls apart. But yeah, I think this thing on her ear works. And here on the head, I'm already doing the shading, but then later I figured out I was kind of lazy, and I looked at a rough, like a rough reference, and yeah, did a little do-over, made it a little more detailed, like this emblem on her head, which we'll see later. Yeah, and here I only had like one clipping mask, which was the entire drawing. and then I did the shading for these single parts like the belt and stuff and drew over it, and then I selected the belt layer where I put down the base brown color and inverted the selection and then removed so that all the shading is actually just on top of the area it was supposed to be. Yeah, here you see I looked at another reference and saw, okay, this should look a little bit differently, more detailed. It doesn't look that great now that I look at it, like even though I did the final line art, it looks kind of rough. But again, like there's lots of details in this drawing, so if not everything is perfect, doesn't really matter. When you look at references, you can always see how detailed is it really. Like some drawings, there's like not mistakes, but like just some stuff they didn't really touch up or just left pretty rough, and it just works out because the overall image looks fine. And this is where I actually drew in the little pebble very late in the drawing, but like pretty much the only reason she's looking at her boot. As I said, the pose should make sense, and it should there should be a reason why this character is in that pose. I mean, there's no rules to art, but this is like just a tip I would give myself to draw more interesting stuff. But yeah, have you already watched this anime and can you recommend it? Because this is not an anime I would watch on my own. I wouldn't get the idea to actually watch it, because every genre of anime I'm watching is pretty much the same. There's like heroes of different classes and they fight monsters, like Jujutsu Kaisen, One Punch Man, Solo Leveling, Chainsaw Man, and now I'm watching a lot of mysteries. Yeah, it's pretty much all the same genre. Might get repetitive at some point, but yeah, a lot of mysteries is very interesting because it's in Chinese and I have to watch it subbed. I usually always watch dubbed because the German dub is pretty fucking great. But yeah, pretty nice, and it's very well animated. Yeah, here I'm going into more details in the shading because everything else was more detailed. So I was like, okay, now I have to kind of paint over the torso stuff, breasts, to make it more detailed. Otherwise it wouldn't fit the overall look of the drawing. And I may have missed it. Oh no, I don't think so. Later on I noticed that the pants she's wearing need to be more smooth. But yeah, right now I'm doing the rendering of the eyes. A little bit too early because later on I noticed that the eyes look a little bit weird, like from the positioning and where she's looking. But yeah, you can go very over detailed even with the shading in the eyes. Looks great. Yeah, and here I'm doing so much to actually reposition the pupils, and later on I'm repositioning her right eye, which is also smart because when you look from this kind of perspective, it is kind of a 4/3 perspective. The top of the nose kind of flows into the eyebrow. You will see later or in the thumbnail. Alright, and here I'm doing something very nice, which is coloring the line art, which I can only recommend. Basically from the base color of the object you're tracing, no, not tracing, but like putting the line art around, select that base color and make it way darker and more saturated, and then use that for the line art around it. And yeah, while doing that, because I'm going to such detailed views, I realized some mistakes here and there, like there was some color missing on the bow tie and like these stripes on the legs were missing. Yeah, and here I'm going into the eye, bam. And also drew like little lines for the eyelids, which you can always do, like these little creases on top of the eye. And more coloring for the line art. Just makes it look a little bit more natural, like you can use black outlines if that's the style you want to go for, but this is just like in my opinion, it adds like another like 5% or 10% to the overall drawing. And here was this little kind of ring, which you can barely see, which I colored in pretty fast, and all these little glowing details on this belt and these other metal objects. And yeah, more messing around with the eyes to make it look better, more correct. You should also do this stuff before coloring, because as you see here, I had to reposition all these coloring layers afterwards. So really get these eyes tuned in before doing any rendering. And more changing and more adjusting, it just takes time. It's just because when you rush something but you want it perfect, you're doing the same work twice repetitively instead of doing it once correctly. Yeah. Okay, here is the part which I was talking about. The pants look too textured. It's a very smooth piece of clothing, like, and the shape of the legs is like, it stretches around the leg, which doesn't have texture pretty much. So I was smoothing it out, like drawing over this layer with an airbrush using the same colors to make it less rough and more smooth. The eyes again, some blush on the cheeks because I felt like the face was like too unique color, like lacked some shading. And more coloring the line art. Like my process here was like color in the line art, but when I realized something that needs some work, pause it and yeah, correct the mistake. Or like add some shading and then go back to line art. Back to coloring the line art. Coloring the line art, holy shit. Yeah, this was the base color. And this was like some purple on the eyes. Then I realized, oh, the bottom of the shoe was missing some brown. Bam, filled that in real quick. Did some fast shading. And then in one of the last steps, yeah, kind of adding some glow to the eyelids so it isn't like just one color. And using some, no, not using, but like drawing in some extra hair strands, which was kind of strange because these hairs don't have an outline, but I think it looks pretty decent. Messed around with some gradients, some shading, and yeah, it works pretty fine. And here on the ear, adding some more shading and texture. And then I was trying to figure out how to do the background, looking at some stuff I noted to fix, just the basic small details. But yeah, for the background, you see how it looks like right now. Didn't really know what to do, but maybe just leave the space empty or do like one color gradient. And yeah, this is the final drawing as you saw in the thumbnail. So that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave some comments. I would greatly appreciate it, and leave a like. See you next time.